Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to your show Think Big and Be Inspired. And today it's our 52nd episode actually. And I'm so happy to have today my guest. As I was talking to her before the show, that when I saw her speech, I said that I want to connect with her. I want to listen to her story and I want to share her story with people. Our guest has 17 years of experience and more as an attorney, and she's a TEDx speaker. She's put a lot of training programs for lawyers and all that, and she has like her own way of doing trainings, and she's an amazing expert, an amazing person. So without further ado, let's welcome our friend here, Sejal Thakkar. Sejal, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. This is so cool. I'm so excited to be a guest on your show. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming in, and I'm happy to have you on the show. Sejal, of course, I don't know, not everybody has seen your beautiful TEDx speech. So let's start talking about how to manage conquer bias. And I've seen some of your TEDx speech that you were born in an Italian neighborhood in USA, I think, and you suffered from bias, from some discrimination coming from proud to be coming from an Indian roots and Indian origins. So tell us about this beautiful story.
Yeah, absolutely. My parents were immigrants from India. They moved here in 1974, and I was actually conceived in India and born in Chicago. So it's kind of
Okay.
I'm like on the margin, as you can define it. But as you said, when I grew up, it was a predominantly Italian neighborhood. So it was an interesting experience growing up because my parents just moved here from India. They barely spoke any English, like most immigrant families, right? They came here because they wanted a better future for their kids and their family. So they started working right off the bat. And at home, it was really like living in India. I mean, we ate Indian food, the religion, the culture, the clothes, everything. And then the minute I stepped outside of my house, it was like being in America, right? And I love both cultures and proud to be both Indian and American, right? So, but as a child, growing up with two different worlds like that, it was confusing at times, right? So I dealt with a lot of that issue at home. And then outside of the home, and I talk about this more in my TEDx talk, is where, because we were the only Indian family in this Italian neighborhood, I dealt with harassment, discrimination, and bullying at a very young age. So that's kind of what I talk about the story in my TEDx talk. And I break it down in the talk on three different dimensions. What I've seen in my career as an attorney, as a facilitator and trainer, is that bias is something that word is misunderstood by so many people. People just don't understand it. I mean, I didn't learn about what I talk about in my TEDx talk until way later in my career, to be honest with you. It's not something that I learned in law school even. So it wasn't until years after I was actually out in the world doing the research and learning this that I was like, wow, people really need to understand this, because there are some bad people out there that are racist and sexist. We've seen a lot of that last year, but there's also a lot of people that don't understand that a lot of the hardwiring, a lot of the way that bias shows up unconsciously, and how that can impact us in our interactions with everybody else. So I try to explain that in my talk as well.
Yeah, I've seen the talk, and I advise everybody to see it. I put a link for it in our chat and in our announcement for the show. And it was really great, and we'll tap on this, of course, during our talk. I know, of course, it must have been hard a little bit, this kind of discrimination and growing on an Italian neighborhood and all that. But I think you've dealt with it strongly. I think it gave you the courage and strength to be what you are today and to be a successful leader like you are today, really, Sejal.
It wasn't easy,
Yes.
At the time when I was younger, I mean, like any kid in that situation, I was pissed off. I was angry. I was fighting back. I was standing up for myself. It wasn't pretty, and it took a lot of growth and really just figuring out where I wanted to go in my life and what I wanted it to look like, and that took a lot of hard work. I think one thing that I'll share with you that is, I think, important for anybody that's watching this or listening to this to understand is that I don't blame those kids. I don't blame those kids for treating me the way they did. And they treated me pretty bad. I mean, there was a lot of name calling. There was graffiti on our house. There was toilet paper. They were, destroying the home that I lived in. A lot of harassment, bullying type behaviors, feeling excluded all the time. So there was so much that I could have been holding on to and
Yeah.
carried with me in my life. But what I realized and what I try to do in my talk and what I really out there helping people see different perspectives on this issue is that it's not our fault that a lot of times when we end up in these situations, and when we act out of bias, it hurts everybody involved, not just the person on the receiving end. It really does. It's not just I say something to one person, it's only going to hurt that. It hurts our entire society. So it's in everybody's best interest to really understand, how do we move past those situations in a way that makes sense for us to make connections with each other. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. Like, you're having me on this show because something on that talk resonated with you, it connected with you, and you're like, I want to share her story with. And that's what we're hardwired to do, is to connect with other people, right?
Thank you, Sejal. Yes, I totally agree with you, and thank you for people joining us. Shiva, thank you so much for joining us. Robert Berry, thank you for joining us also. Shiva, yeah, I totally agree with you, and of course it's hard. We cannot blame others on what's happening, and it's good that you managed to move on and managed to overcome this. So tell us, I know from what I listened, there are 3 levels of bias, and it was new information for me.
Yeah.
Can you share with us this 3 levels of bias?
Yeah. So the way that I broke it down was really talking about the first part of the talk is talking about the pain of bias. So that's the part where I talked about my journey. And so to kind of give a little bit more detail on what I went through growing up, and, there was a lot of exclusion that I was feeling, and I was dealing with, there wasn't any support back then. And there still isn't, even now, there isn't that much support, right? So there wasn't anybody that I could talk to about what was going on. There wasn't anybody at school that could support me. And so it wasn't like I can go to any of my friends. They wouldn't understand. So a lot of immigrant children, and that was one of the reasons why I also wanted to do the talk, was to raise awareness on the fact that immigrant children that are born in this country don't have a lot of support for their own issues to help us navigate through those situations. What do we do when we are born here, right? I mean, the problem of being born somewhere else, we know that that's a problem that needs to be dealt with. But a separate problem is being born here and then still being made to feel like you're not from here,
Not belonging, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so there needs to be more support for that. So when I was growing up, there was nothing. And the only person there for me was my father. And so, whenever I would get into this, I had gotten suspended from school several times, I was fighting back. I mean, life was, if I would have continued on this path, let me tell you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I mean, I'd probably be in jail somewhere, right? Like, it wasn't going to be pretty. God. It was bad. I was feeling a lot of rage inside, and it sucked. It was horrible. And so, but I would talk to my dad about it, and I talk about one situation in the talk where, when I was growing up, I always asked why all the time. I think kids generally ask a lot of questions,
yes.
But I was always wanting to know why for everything. Why are they making fun of your accent? Why are they, why are you telling, even at home, right? So my parents at home were telling me things like, don't go sit out in the sun for too long because you'll get too dark. And I'm like, who cares? I like being tan. I like being dark, and so there was all these things going on that just to me didn't make sense. So I was like, why is this happening? And these conversations that I would have with my dad, they were really hard because sometimes they didn't know what to tell me. Sometimes they would say, just, don't ignore them, walk away from it. And I really struggled with the pain of how do I move past this? So couple of lessons that he shared with me in that, and I mentioned this in my talk, where, you know, he would give me advice, and it really helped me in my life overcome those situations. So one of the things he would always tell me is, you know, people that hurt other people, they themselves are hurting inside, right? So the reason
True.
why people hurt other people is because they're also suffering in some way. And then he would always tell me that bias is not one dimensional. You know, it's like, look, each one of us has the capacity to be hurtful or harmful to somebody else, whether we intend to or it's unintentional, right? And so those lessons really resonated with me and really helped me through my journey. So I go into detail about an incident that happened when I was growing up, where somebody put a note on my locker, right?
Yeah.
And the note said, "Go back to your country."
Yes.
And that was sort of like the breaking point for me. This was around, you know, in high school. And I by this point, I was just, I had dealt with so much already. And so I had a conversation with my dad, and I stayed up all night after that. And the next morning when I woke up, you know, I thought about, like, what am I doing with my life? Is this really what I want? Am I going to be a victim to this situation? It's not good. We don't want that for anybody, but what am I going to do? And I just decided I wasn't gonna be a victim. And I said I was gonna use my life in whatever way I could, so that people don't feel excluded, because I felt excluded. I felt that way my whole life, and I didn't want anybody else to feel that way. And you shouldn't have to feel that way. You know, I think what we've heard growing up in this country and in other countries is what people want us to hear, not necessarily the way it should be. And so we're rewriting a lot of that stuff. And so that's the pain part that I talked about in my the first part of my talk.
Yeah, it's amazing, of course. And as you said, everyone like has a point where he say that's enough, and the turning point in his life. And when you look back at it, maybe at that time it was really painful, but maybe you will feel that you are blessed that this happened to you, and you decided to go on this path and help a lot of people understand about this kind of how to deal with this kind of pressure, and how to move on. So it's great. Yes, it's great what you did and what you're doing now. And we have here Ahmad Ismail is joining us also. Hi, Ahmad. Thank you for joining us. Ahmad Musa. Hey, guys. Good to see you. Thank you, Ahmad Musa, for joining us. And also Liliana is a great fan of the show. Thank you, Liliana, for coming every time. Thank you so much. Tell us also, I want to ask you about do we make judgments of people from the first few moments? Because also I know you have a lot of experience about that. So do we make, like, I heard, like 10, 11 judgments of people right away, and this is really true, or this, do we recall it right away, or just goes to our subconscious mind? Or tell me about that.
Yeah. And so that you know, about how we make judgments and whatnot,
Yeah,
that's the part where in my talk where I talk about the power of bias, right? Because
yeah,
when we hear that word bias, a lot of times we automatically assume that it's a negative thing. Like there's a negative
yeah.
stereotype associated with just the word itself, right?
Yes,
And so
yes,
I want to normalize that conversation, because we can't move on to true inclusion until we all understand how bias works and how unconscious bias works. So could be unconscious, or it could be conscious bias, right? Bias in and of itself isn't a good or bad thing. It's not positive. It could be positive or it could be negative. And
I get it.
it could be about anything. It could be about your hair color, your skin color, your size of your teeth, the size, you know, the way your hairstyle is. It could be the way you
Yes,
smile. It could be anything, right? But when we hear it, especially after this last year and a half of what we've gone through, we've dealt with COVID, we've dealt with the civil rights movement, we've dealt with the political division. I mean, there's just so much that's happened that when we hear the word bias, people just disconnect altogether. They're like, not me, I don't have it. I mean, that's the first thing. A lot of times people are, I see it on their face, right?
yes,
When I do my
yes,
trainings, and I'll tell people on my training. So
yes,
if you
yes.
have a brain, you have bias. I could see right away. Half the people are like, she's smoking something, right? They're like, it's not true, right? But the reality is, if you have a brain, you have bias. It's a fact. There's no denying
Yes,
that, right?
yes,
But it's unconscious bias, right? And so really, what I wanted to demonstrate is, just because of the way that our brain is wired, unconsciously, there's things that are happening without us knowing it. And intention has nothing to do with it. It's not that we're intending to be bad people or we're intending to be good people. It's just that the way that the brain works. So bias isn't something to get rid of. It's not you're a bad person because you have bias, because no, you're just normal if you have bias. But it's really about understanding that when you meet somebody, it could be somebody that you're meeting for the first time, your brain is going to make certain assumptions about them, like in a blink of an eye. Right. So
Yeah.
I mentioned this in the talk that within the first 7 seconds of meeting somebody, you're going to make 11 judgments about that person.
Wow.
And then you spend the rest of your time after you've met them trying to find evidence to confirm those initial impressions.
These are right. Yeah.
Even if they're wrong. Even if they're wrong. So this is the problem, right? This is a huge problem. Yes. And so the thing is it's a problem when you don't know about it. When you know about it, there are simple strategies that you can put into place to minimize that. So for example, with me, as you mentioned earlier, and we talked about, I was bullied by Italian kids, right? Yeah. Now, if I meet somebody today, and this happened to me just the other day, actually, it was a podcast I was doing. Okay. And the host was Italian.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Okay. And when they said that, I immediately felt something happen inside of me, a negative reaction. There's nothing I can do about it. Yeah. My shoulders went up. I physically reacted. Right. Yes. But I know how it works. So now I can say, Sejal, stop. Like this person is not that person. Right. That happened years ago. But that's the thing. So that's why I want to normalize this conversation, is that once you understand that these are just a part of who you are, then you can put strategies into place. So in my talk, I give 3 simple strategies. I use the HAT acronym, right? Where I say, because what we're really trying to do to mitigate bias is to go from your unconscious to your conscious. So we want to basically slow our thinking down. What we're trying to do is just slow the way that we process information down so that we can say, wait a second, here's what I'm thinking. And now I want to make sure that whatever actions I take, whatever I say, lines up with what I believe today, not what happened to me when I was a kid. Right. So there's things you can do about it. But this is the thing. People don't know about it. That's why I'm out there talking about this day and night. Like today, I have 3 different podcasts that I'm going to be on talking about this, because I believe it's that important for people to really understand this so that we can move towards a better world. I really, truly believe that.
It's a great mission in life, and I'm so happy that you came to us. And it's a busy day for you, and it's true. We're wired, or we have, because of our background or something happened to us in the past, and you must wake up. Like it's a wake up call, like you did, like you had the reaction or something. So you said, no, it's this thing happened in the past, and it's not like stereotyping, not because he's Italian, so he must be a bully or something like that. So yeah, it's amazing. Thank you for sharing this great insights with us. And Ibrahim is saying, no pain, no gain. Great story, guys. Thank you, Ibrahim. Ahmed Khaled also joining us from Saudi. Great insights. Thank you, Ahmed. Kim McNeely, hello. Thank you, Kim, for joining us. Ahmed, again, great self-awareness. Thank you, Ahmed, for joining us. So tell us about, let's go to your training programs, and what's a legal training ninja? Is this like kind of a title, or you invented this? And tell us about it, about your trainings. It seems to be more practical, more engaging with people. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so the Legal Training Ninja is just a name I gave to myself. But the legal stands for the fact that I'm an employment law attorney, right? So I've been licensed in California since 2003. So that's where the legal part comes in. The training is because, after actually, so I talk about this as well in my talk, is the paradox part of the bias, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of a cool, not cool, but an interesting fact about why I think my perspectives are a little bit different. So when I grew up, I was the victim of bias, right? But when I graduated law school, I think a lot of people, when they hear my story, they probably think that I was representing the victims, right? Because I was a victim, and you would think that I would be doing those cases. But actually, I ended up representing the supervisors and the leaders who were being accused of harassing and abusing other people. So I was on the other side than what probably would have been the normal trajectory. But that's really critical to my perspective, because when I got to that side, and now that I was dealing with people who were accused of doing bad things, I first of all had to work through my own biases to be able to be a good attorney, right? Because I had to face them head on and say, you're not going to be neutral until you figure out how you're going to stay neutral, right? I had to be very intentional about it. And so I had to create my own strategies so that I could do my work well and be successful. But then when I was thinking in my mind, God, these people are going to be evil. They're going to be malicious people. They're going to be horrible, like the worst kind of people. That's what I was thinking in my mind. And I know I had my work to do to make sure I was still fair. But then when I actually started working on these cases, actually, it wasn't that at all. It was most of the people that I was defending, they did bad things, but they weren't bad people. They just didn't realize that these unconscious biases were impacting their behaviors, their decision-making. And so a lot of the time I was like, wait a second, I need to educate you on how this works and what do we do? So I started doing training as a way to kind of help resolve conflict rather than actually litigate it. And then over the years, I found that training is just a great way to impact people. So I started doing a lot of training. So that's where the training comes from. And then the ninja is from the fact that, I feel like in my life, you just heard about what happened to me when I was growing up. But I feel like I've had to deal with a lot in my life, and I refuse to let it impact my inner ninja. So that's where that ninja comes from, is that I'm not going to let the outside world impact my inner world. And I'm going to fight hard. That doesn't, I'm human. And I, like everybody else, I have to be really intentional about it, but I'm not going to do that, and it's just not who I love the person that I'm on the inside, and I'm going to just keep being that. So
it's a great title. I like it. And I think you used what your dad has told you before, that people who are bullying or something like that, they're doing that, they have problems and issues themselves, or maybe they are unconsciously doing that and they don't know. So that's why it helped you, I think, when you were defending those people or doing trainings for those people. Yeah. That's really great. So, how did you get a chance to do this like TEDx speech, and how do you apply for it, or how does this happen? Tell us about it.
So that is a great story. I actually, I think a lot of people say they want to do the TEDx talk, and especially if you're a public speaker. So it was definitely on my list of things to do, but it was like way back there. I was like, if I get to it, I get to it. I'm not going to put any effort into it right now. And then last year, one of my connections on LinkedIn, we were having a conversation, and she literally was like, you need to do a TEDx talk. And so shout out to Jennifer Myers. Jennifer Myers is an amazing person. She saw it in me before I saw it in me. And so she was like, I'm going to help you she helps people with their applications. She applies for them. And then she did the same thing for me. And then 3 months later, I was accepted already at a TEDx talk. So Jennifer Myers, look her up on LinkedIn or reach out to me. I'm happy to introduce you to her. She's awesome.
Amazing. That's great. Shout out to Jennifer Myers. And really, I think you did great. And tell us, how did you also come with the idea and make it like in 10 minutes, few minutes, and all this preparations that you did? How long did it take you to make it? Because I think people when they watch it, they want to know how long did it take you to prepare for it?
Sure. Yeah. So what you do is you fill out an application, you submit it to different TEDx's, and then it's a competitive process. But then if you get selected, usually you would go on stage and actually do the talk, which is really what I wanted to do. Honestly, I was bummed out. I was like, what? I want to be on the actual stage, and that's really what I enjoy the most. But so anyway, I was still very grateful for the opportunity. And so we recorded that talk, but the preparation process is pretty tough. I'll tell you. I must have rewritten my script because you have to write the whole thing out, which is really
Yes.
a new thing for me, because I usually, even during my trainings, I don't actually script out the whole thing, right? I do bullet points, I make some points, but for TEDx, you actually have to script out the whole thing. So that is really hard to put down your words that you're thinking and the story into writing, which is, again, something I've never done again. So that added a whole different layer of preparation. And I must have rewritten my script at least 500 times. Okay.
Oh my God.
I say thousand, like thousand, just the number comes to mind, but that's probably about the number of times I practiced it. Right. But
Yeah.
but it's important, right? Because you're getting up in front of everybody and you want to make sure you communicate certain
Yeah.
things. For me, the reason I did that talk was to impact people, right?
Yes.
And so I spent a lot of time just thinking. I had to go really deep and get vulnerable with myself to bring that story out, and to decide which story to use. So then you have to like really kind of think through the flow of the talk. When you're recording it, then you have all these other logistical things to worry about, lighting and where you're going to
Yeah.
do it, and all of that stuff. And then also, I think another thing for people to really kind of know is it's a time commitment. It
Yeah.
really is a time commitment. It took me, I would say, about 3 months to get from point A to point Z to where I delivered it. So it's you need to have the time, and it's not something that you can just, so I was lucky that when I did it, I already had enough work on my plate so that I can
Yeah.
kind of take out some of the other stuff that I was doing and really focus in on that. But that's something to consider too. So yeah, it was great. I mean, I totally am. I feel
It
blessed.
was worth. I think it was
I can't
worth.
believe it still. Yeah, I still can't believe I was selected, but I'm so glad I was. Yeah.
It was worth, and because you have a story, you went through struggles, and from struggles we are reborn, I always say, and you're doing great, and it was worth, I think, all the preparations, and it came out so good. I think it was amazing speech. So tell me, from your experience, what do you think makes a good public speaker? If we give like few points
Yeah.
about that, your
Sure.
reflections on that,
Yeah, I to me, the first thing when I think of a good public speaker is authentic, right?
yeah,
Like, to me, I mean, anybody that I just feel like you can pick up on that right away from somebody if they're being authentic or not. I think if you're vulnerable as a speaker, the more that you can connect with other people as human beings. So if I'm comfortable being vulnerable about my mistakes or my story, then other people are going to connect with me because they've been through things like that in their life too. So you have to be able to connect with other people. I think that some of the public speakers that I look up to, and not look up to, but just that I think are amazing, they speak from their heart.
yeah.
They bring it from that passion has to be there from their heart, where, if I don't believe in what I'm talking about, nobody else is going to believe it either. Right.
Oh,
So you really have to drive it from passion. I mean, somebody said this to me the other day. They were like, Sejal, you're always so excited when you talk about this topic, and I'm like, I can't help that. It's just something that's, I wish it was like that about everything in my life. But when I talk about these topics, it just comes from inside, because it is. And then the last thing I'll add about the public speaker thing, I think I think if you practice at it, I think anybody could become a public speaker. I really do. I don't think it's like you have a certain things that's why you can be a public speaker. I think anybody can be a public speaker. Everybody's speaking style is different. So you just have to
yeah.
own your own style and make it who you are, and people will love you. You don't have to be like me, or I don't have to be like you. Just be you, and just everybody will love it. That's what I feel anyway.
Lovely, lovely. It's hard to add to this, but exactly as you say, share your story and be proud of your story. Be proud of your roots. Follow your passion, and things I think will fall into place. Model Islam is joining us also, and Ahmed Khalid is agreeing. Authenticity and vulnerability are the key for great speaking. Totally agree, Ahmed. Thank you for your great comments today. Sejal, if you want to share also some points to people who are struggling, people who are having problems of diversity, inclusion, bias problems, few words to those people, how to overcome this and how to stay strong.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think one of the things that I believe we need to do as a society is to support one another, right? So I would say first thing at my conversation is directed to people that are observing other people struggling. This is for that person right now, is you need to do something, right? You cannot be a bystander. We cannot be bystanders anymore. We cannot allow people in our communities, in our families, in our workplaces to be harassed, to be discriminated, to be treated that way. We just cannot allow it. So to the bystanders, it is your responsibility to intervene. How you do that is going to depend on the situation. Okay. It's going to depend on the environment and whether you feel safe or not, but you have to do something. You cannot let it continue to happen. So that's for those people. Now, the people that are on the receiving end, your job is not to educate everybody about why it hurts to be in that position. Okay. I chose to do this because it's a part of my healing journey, and I chose this. But you don't have to do this. But what you have to do is take care of yourself. That is the only thing you do, is take care of yourself. Focus on your own self and figure out, how am I going to react? Make that choice that I made that day that I talk about in my TEDx talk, where I said, I can go this way or I can go that way. And then I chose a direction, and then I lined up my behavior to that. So that's your responsibility. Your responsibility isn't to educate. Your responsibility isn't to be out there in the rallies or to do any of that. It's to take care of yourself. But everybody else needs to not stand around and watch it happen either, right? So let's just all agree to just doing that work. It's necessary.
Exactly. Even with some words, just saying even no to bias, no to this, no to that, and sharing this with people, even in social media now. Social media is becoming more and more powerful, and people have now followers. People are saying this. Even if we're sharing this story now, that's part of saying no to what's happening like this. And like you said, for people who are suffering from that, just take care of your mental health, and stay strong. And as you said, make the choice either to be the victim or to take a solid change in your life. And that's true. Pragmata also joining us. He's a great friend of the show, also from India. Prag, thank you so much. Sure is saying that one has to be a good listener to enhance wisdom, understand people mindset before being a public speaker. Sure, one can connect well once you know the art of reading people's mind. Great comment, Prag, and I totally agree with you.
Me too. Yes.
Sejal, time is passing by, and really, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today. It's been amazing. But before we go, also, I want to ask you about your other titles, like, because I like it, the Chief Civility Officer and all that. Tell us about it also, and tell us about your experience in training, and I've seen like studios or something like that. Your last assignment. Tell us about it.
Oh yeah, it's really cool. So I started my own company, Train Extra, 3.5 years ago. And so the title I gave myself there was Chief Civility Officer, right? Because
I like it.
I saw a lot of incivility happening at work as an attorney, and I wanted to help organizations deal with that incivility so that they foster cultures of civility. So that's where my Chief Civility Officer comes. But just recently, I'm super excited. And actually, this is the first show that I'm actually talking about it like in this way.
Great. Exclusive to us. That's great.
I mean, I haven't even formally announced it yet on LinkedIn. It's happening. I changed the title, but I haven't made the announcement. Yes, a venture studio called Nobody Studios. I've been working with them since January as a co-founder on one of their products. And they just asked me to be their chief culture officer. So I'm going to be working with them. I'm making sure that we keep our people first. We create an environment of belonging, of civility, of dignity, respect. So I'm just beyond the moon for this opportunity.
Great. Great, great. See what your passion has driven you and what you attracted. Because I totally believe in that, the turning point and what happened to you, and you decided to change your life and destiny. And I think you attracted this kind of job because it really suits you and really suits what you're doing. If I say I don't really know you well, but I can say that I'm really proud of you, proud of what you're achieving and what you present, really. And it's an honor to have you today, Sejal. So tell me, before we go, you said about also judgment and judging people. What's your first impressions when you met me, if I may ask?
Oh, I thought you're amazing. I mean, just even on LinkedIn
Thank
before
you.
we met, but today, okay, first of all, I felt welcome from the minute you turned the camera on, right? You made me feel
Thank you.
very at ease and welcome. You're an amazing host, and I know
Thank you
that
so
this is
much.
going to be just one of the conversations. This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, no question about it.
That's great. Yeah, I had great also impressions from you. Very very professional, and I'm so happy to have you on the show. And I hope that we meet again and very soon. And there will be a lot of collaborations between us. And congratulations on your new role. I know that you're going to succeed and you're going to flourish in it and make change in people's life like you're doing now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sejal, and thank you really to everyone who joined us. Thank you, Amy Knazovic, of course, also for joining us. She's a great coach also and was part of the show during one of the episodes. So thank you, Sejal, and thank you, everybody, and glad to see you all. Take care. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you.